Collective. Welcome back to Pearl Snap Tarot. Make it snappy. Just hanging out with Jocko here, reminiscing about my time in Boulder, Colorado. Sort of a woke location where people have the woke mind virus was emanating out of there. And I got canceled after I started seeing through a lot of weird stuff that was going on there, okay? So today, the dominant words coming through in my download were among us. Among us. Now that's a video game, and I don't play it, but I've seen clips from it, and I think it's hilarious. I like Among Us. But it's kind of like that reminds me of what was going on in Boulder a little bit. It's just there's always somebody sneaking up on you with a big knife they were going to plunge into your back any second, you know? I got canceled really bad out of there. When I think about Boulder, I think about that famous picture, the construction of the Flatirons. And it's like a Photoshop job somebody did to pretend like the Flatirons are fake. You know, but possibly Boulder was like a fake town that was kind of like set aside or off in a remote location so that weird experiments could be done there. Boulder, I know, is sort of a CIA experiment town where they do weird things to people and weird experiments, and so all this woke shit was happening there. But also a lot of, I think, illicit business was taking place there. Part of why I got kicked out of that town was because I could see the money laundering. I could see it. I understood what was going on. And I could see the corruption in some of the institutions, the experiments going on with people and students at CU Boulder and Naropa, and the stuff that was going on with Naropa and Shambhala International and at their Buddhist retreat center near Fort Collins. And I kept having all this weird stuff happen to me. I could just go on for days about it. I probably will. I'm probably gonna write a book about it or something, but people need to know, like, something's wrong with Boulder. One of the things that really offends me the most about Boulder was the way they were running all these operations to encourage young people to become transgender. That all happened while I was there. And this is back around 2014 is when I was last there. Now that's quite a while ago now. It's almost 10 years. It's 10 years ago, yeah. But at that time, the woke stuff was hot and heavy. And up to a few years before that, it was becoming that way. And when I worked at Naropa for a little while, and I observed something going on there that looked like some sort of mind control experiments. I was working there in 2011, and the president of the university, Stuart Lord, was, I don't even know what to call it. He was acting up. Okay, Lord had a handler And he didn't go anywhere or do anything without that handler shadowing him. Every move he made, every place he went he had that handler shadowing him, almost like telling him what to do or something. And the way that he was behaving seemed like he was being controlled to me. Looking back on it, I do think it was some kind of an experiment where he was being controlled by someone else all the time. But his behavior was not controlled. It was out of control. This is why I am saying it seemed experimental. It was just weird. It was really, really weird. People all over the school were talking about how he was being abusive to people and yelling at people and stuff. I was working in the marketing department. I wasn't on the faculty there. I was on the staff because I do marketing, or I did before I retired. So I came in during the summer of 2011, I think. Something like that. Okay, so this is more of this Among Us stuff. And it has to do with this transgender stuff too. And illusion and mind control and people controlling other people and stuff. And one of the departments at Naropa it's literary, and it stems from the Beat poets and Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg and Anne Waldman, those people. And it's called the Jack Kerouac School of Disembodied Poetics. And I'll never forget, at the main orientation ceremony they had that fall for all the new staff and new faculty, when they welcomed us all in, they had people stand up in the audience from the School of Disembodied Poetics and recite some kind of poems, like I think they were haiku or something. And I was really struck by two things. Number one, the robotic quality of the way the people who recited the poetry were speaking, as if they were controlled. That was the first thing that struck me, really strongly too. I was like, what's wrong with that person? As soon as they stood up and started talking, I knew there was something weird going on. And then I looked down at the professor who was there with them from that department. I looked at him, and I don't remember now what this guy's name was, but I remember seeing him smirking. He was smirking. Almost like, nobody can figure out that we're controlling these weirdos, you know? Like, I knew what was going on in that moment. Pearl Snap knew. These people were doing something weird with the occult, where they were bringing in spirits, disembodied spirits. That's what I think. Some of their experiments were with occult stuff. And some of their experiments, some of their faculty were transgender. Very obviously so. Okay. Very, very obviously so. And they hated me because they knew I could see through them. Waldman and Dilly, you know. They had a lot of transgender people there. They were mingling and mixing and smirking at all the dumb students who didn't know. It was really, really creepy. It's creepy. Naropa's creepy. The Jack Kerouac School of Disembodied Poetics is creepy. And at that time, nothing was ready for the fall. You know, they should have had a catalog produced by then, and they were about to go into registration for the fall semester, and nothing was done. It was just the whole place was in chaos. And Stuart Lord was in the background, looming over everything, yelling at people, and somebody transferred from his office into our department, traumatized. And people were saying they hated him, and it was just crazy. It was crazy. Whatever was going on there was crazy. And there were people in my department that were acting crazy, and they put me in a back room away from everyone else on the staff, on the marketing staff, and something was hitting me there. I think they were hitting me with direct energy weapons right there in the building. I was in the Lalanda building, which is not on the old Naropa campus. It's in a different part of town. And it was in an industrial building that Naropa bought and turned into a separate campus. And they had art classes there and other things, and the marketing department was over there. And they had me in a part of it that was separate from the rest of the offices. And periodically I would feel this weird heating up of my body and my skin, and it was like it would make my skin feel like it was vibrating or something. And after I left there, I decided that they were hitting me with energy weapons right in that building, right in my office. I definitely think they were. Okay, I can't prove that, but you know, like, why did they put me separate from everyone else? They did. Simultaneously, the rest of this marketing department was they were mistreating me, okay? They were leaving me out of meetings. They were doing mean girl stuff to me. It was a bunch of women that were really a bunch of weirdos. And almost everyone who had a position of authority at Naropa during that time was an interim person, okay? They were an interim director of some sort. So nobody on the staff there was really like a legitimate professional. They had all come in from outside and they were doing something to Naropa. They were kind of like transforming it or taking it over or something. And so that's why no business was getting done as usual. Like I said, no catalog was ready to go for registration. When registration finally rolled around, they had a kind of a makeshift Xeroxed catalog that people got confused about, and there was so much confusion in the place. And I remember the orientation they had me go to when I first came there, with some other staff that were new, and we met in a conference room in the marketing department, and we all had questions. We all were like, what the hell is going on here at Naropa? What is all this chaos? And what's wrong with President Lord? And, you know, and when we started asking those questions, some of the people who were on the staff who were doing the orientation were visibly shocked by our questions. It was like their reaction was, oh my God, they can see through everything. How did they see through this? Oh my God. Oh, these people are a threat to, I mean, they were openly alarmed, and it was clear that our questions were a threat to them. It was clear. And after that, things got worse for me there. In fact, I wasn't there very long. And it was weird because even then I was really super intuitive, and it was weird because I actually quit that job when things built up to a crescendo with the weirdness. I quit on the very day they were going to fire me. When someone was coming to my office to fire me and I didn't even know it, I quit that day. It was kind of like, you can't fire me because I quit. And I didn't even know they were going to fire me. The interim director who was running the marketing department was Lisa Trank, who was a PR person who seemed more concerned about her own resume and what she could get under her belt to say she did PR for Naropa than to direct the marketing department. She didn't do anything to help the marketing department or to advance any of the projects that were necessary to help the students there. And they had all these projects going on that were, they had a bunch of freelancers doing the marketing, okay? And they were just running up huge bills, allowing the staff, the faculty rather, to revise the brochures that represented their departments over and over and over and over and over. Like efficient marketing, you do maybe 1 or 2 rounds of corrections and then it goes to print, and you have someone doing project management who doesn't let it go over that because then it gets over budget and it costs too much. But these people were running the place into the ground, and they had all these brochures they were working on that were way too big and bulky and long, and these professors were like, oh, no, I don't like the way that sounds. I need to rewrite that. And they would rewrite it. They were on like round 10 of the corrections, and they still weren't ready. And it needed to go to print so that they could attract students and stuff. But at that time, they were trying to get federal funds, and the way they did it was to become ecumenical. So they had to switch from being, at one time, Naropa was a very esteemed, it used to be called Naropa Institute. It was a very esteemed institution where people could go to learn about Tibetan Buddhism and Buddhism in general. But these woke people came in, and to get federal money, they made it so that, they had to make it so that it didn't discriminate against any other religions or seem discriminatory. So they had to open it up to classes in different religions, including Wicca and witchcraft. They even had classes in that when I was there. And the premises were being shared by the local Jewish community who were using the auditorium at Nalanda campus for synagogue on weekends. And there was a growing presence of Orthodox Jews in Boulder that were sharing the Naropa resources. Well, eventually the upshot of all this chaos was that President Lord had to be replaced. He was forced to resign while I was there, shortly before I got fired or quit. And a Jewish man became the president at that time. Now, I was there the day that Stuart Lord resigned. And even though Naropa had 2 large auditorium spaces, these people that were controlling this transition made sure that this press conference where he resigned took place in a very small area in the basement of their library where there was limited seating and none of the students could see what was going on. They had to listen over a PA system to what was going on. They couldn't be eyewitnesses to it, which I found very suspicious. Naropa kind of had like a hostile takeover, in my opinion, okay? But it was just one of many places that weird stuff was going on. Many, many places. And many places all over Boulder County, weird stuff was going on. And many businesses and so forth. And while I was there, I did a lot of work to redesign Naropa's little magazine, their periodical that they produced. I designed a beautiful prototype for it, which they threw out and never used. I'm going to include some PDFs, some visuals from that. And it's interesting because one of them was a cover design I did for a travel study program they were doing, where they were taking students down to this area where I am now to visit the borderlands. Okay, these woke people who were in this white-collar community that I now believe was doing money laundering business for the human traffic business that happens down here where I am. I think up there is where they do the administration for all this, or have done. And I think that's where all the money was coming from that needed to be laundered. And it was being laundered through a lot of businesses in Boulder County. For example, these huge, big ad agencies that just suddenly materialized and mushroomed up and had millions of employees. You know, like I lived out in a suburb in a bedroom community of Boulder at the time, Gun Barrel, which suddenly was overtaken by these agencies. Was one of them, and they took over these big industrial warehouses in Gun Barrel, and suddenly what had been quiet streets around this little shopping center where there was a supermarket and a coffee shop and not much else, all of a sudden you couldn't find a parking spot anywhere around there because there were 6 million employees that went to work in these two big industrial warehouses. And you know, the place where I worked too, before I worked at Naropa, was a marketing agency in Boulder that obviously was doing money laundering the last time I worked for them. And that was, well, I worked for this place 4 different times. And the last time I worked for them was in 2014, right before I left Boulder. And it became very obvious to me that money laundering was going on, okay? And how it worked was, I mean, they picked marketing because it was easy for people to come in to a company like that nobody was keeping tabs on, and pretend like they had a company that was doing something legitimate, but really wasn't. It was just these fake companies that would come in, and then they would run up these huge tabs and pay for it with illegitimate money. This is what I think. And a lot of the business that was coming into there was so-called non-profit businesses. Easy to pretend like they were doing stuff that they weren't really doing. It just got so obvious to me. Because the clients all seemed like they were clueless. They were all a bunch of putzes that didn't know what they were doing. And they were full of bullshit. And they were all really narcissistic people. And now that I look back on it, I think they were just like empty clones. This is why I got this download, Among Us, okay? The download was about people who are clones. They don't have any emotional intelligence, okay? They're just like robots who took over in this war we're in to suck up all the resources, suck up all the money, and traffic people, and suck up resources, and do identity theft and fake billings and money laundering and stuff. I think a lot of these people were just clones. And I think that because of the way they acted, almost every single person who came in there and pretended to have a business and pretended to be doing legitimate business were narcissists. And these narcissists are control freaks, and they just come in and they're like, oh, just do what I say. Don't question it. Just do what I say. And, I'm not a narcissist. I'm a fully ensouled being with emotional intelligence. And I was like, why are you acting like that? I saw through them, all of them. So it was a poor choice on their part to keep me in there, but they were just basically just babysitting me because they didn't want me outside of there. That town was a corralling place for people like me who were remnants of the Cold War experiments, okay, and eugenics. I'm from a CIA family too. If you watch my video, The Snap Family Curse, you can see I've finally snapped into that this year, understanding that I'm from a CIA family. The family is like a big cult that's all over Colorado. This is who was making war on the whole country. They organized the coup d'etat. I think eating peanut M&Ms has flashed me back because at this marketing company where I worked in the fake city of Boulder, there were little bowls everywhere of peanut M&Ms to keep everybody all jazzed up on sugar while we did our nonprofit projects making infographics to show why you shouldn't eat sugar. I'll insert one of those here. I think this year in 2025, I'm going to be switching more to just giving these talks and a little bit less divination. Lately, I'm using my divination skills to help me figure out things that are going on around me in my immediate environment, because I'm still having to endure episodes of organized stalking and harassment all the time. I'm stuck down here, and I believe my identity's been stolen, and I think people have been saying I'm dead. I think people up in Colorado don't even know what happened to me, frankly. I think a lot of people up there that I used to know don't even know what happened to me. And I'd really like to get out of here. I'm looking for help getting out of here. I'm looking for legal help too, to be able to find out what did happen to me, because I'm really handicapped financially. They made sure to get me good and stuck down here with a very limited income, and no one around me who cares about me, separated me from all family and friends from my past, and just made sure that I'd be lost. I've been lost. I'm lost down here. But the least I can do is to try to make these videos to be a service, to tell other people what's been going on in certain parts of the country. Before I left, they were heavy into promoting transgenderism. They were having these award ceremonies that they forced me to do the materials to promote these things. And they'd have these big, expensive, fancy dinners and hand out awards to all these people who mentored trans teens. And there were trans people on the staff there that I didn't even know they were trans, but they were treating me like shit. When I think back to that, they were really mistreating me. I was severely mistreated in the last go-around there in 2014. I was stalked and harassed inside the building, at work, on the job, and it was really, really hard on me. It was terrible what they did. And the upshot was that I was, wrongfully terminated, really, and then I was offered a job in the Aspen area and not offered any other jobs, which forced me to give up the only asset I had. It was a townhome I had been able to buy and been paying mortgage on for 5 years, but I had to give it up. And I moved up to the Aspen area and began working for another narcissist with CIA ties. And that really was just the beginning of my life being ruined. I'll go into it in subsequent videos, but this is installment 1 of Dark Boulder. We'll just pull a couple of cards. Let's see, what does source energy have to tell us? Any messages about what was going on in... Oh, I've got the hiccups from eating peanut M&Ms and drinking coffee like an idiot. What is source energy, and what insights can you bring the collective about Boulder, Colorado, please? What was all that woke mind virus stuff going on there? Okay. It's a deep, dark conspiracy, of course. The way that I found out that Boulder was a CIA experiment town was, well, from frequenting the website Godlike Productions. I became a GLP junkie during the time I lived there. And I went there all the time. And finally, I was detailing what I was going through in Boulder on that website. And finally somebody, and I know a lot of CIA people go to that website, finally somebody clued me in. They said that's the place where they do a lot of, they like to play there. They do a lot of, okay, we had one fall on the floor. What is it? Oh yeah, look, they do a lot of funky shit there. A lot of illusions are created in Boulder. All kinds of weird stuff goes on there. Look at that. Ew. Okay. Let's get one more. What else? Let's get one more. I used to love to go out to El Dorado Springs Pool. That was my favorite thing when I lived there. And after I moved to Longmont, oh my God, it was such a long drive. It took like an hour to get out there. But when I lived in town, I went there all the time. Yeah, it was my home away from home. Springs. That looks a little bit like the old, well, they turned it into a water bottling facility during the time I was there, but once upon a time it had been a, there was a bridge that went over the river, and it had been like a restaurant or something in there. Yeah, I think there was a restaurant in there once upon a time. Okay, we just had the Hierophant card come out too. Now this looks like the Shambhala International Tibetan Buddhist part of Boulder too, which I got. I was out on the fringe of that community, but I was there. I knew people who were involved with it. The person that owned the marketing firm that I worked for 4 different times had been a student of CTR, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, in the 1970s. And so I was always in the presence of the founder's emanations. And I've said to you in previous videos that he became a spirit guide of mine, and I really do believe that. Well, that does it for this installment of Dark Boulder. Thank you for coming back to Pearl Snap Tarot, and I hope you'll come back again. Please like, share, and subscribe. Join the Snap Tribe.